Tonight, it's on the Lawyer Henderson show, y'all. It's on the Lawyer Henderson podcast show. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Tonight on the Lawyer Henderson podcast show. Well, he said he is running for re-election. And he is going to talk about his legacy in his first term. But it's not over because his first term has already been a disaster. And now a talk about a second term would even be more disastrous. Tonight, the Lawyers and Podcast show talks about the 46th president. No, 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 hell no, to Jim Crow Joe. Lawyer Henderson Podcast show was live. Biden's running for re-election here already, but his legacy has been very much damaged. He did not do in his first term, even though it's not, despite it not being over yet, he still has not done with the Lawyer Henderson podcast show. It is good to be with you again here. And as I was coming on, we were talking about the eviction rate among Black women. And we're going to be doing a podcast actually on the eviction of Black women. See, this myth of the strong, independent Black woman is fading, guys. What's going on there? We're going to also be talking about, of course, Asian hate on hate crime. This myth that Black people are out attacking Asians, that's a myth, that's a lie, okay? It's Asian and white people who are mostly specifically targeting Asian people. But they have to put that Black boogeyman there. They got to always have the Black boogeyman. We're going to be talking about Jim Crow Joe Biden and the reasons why Black people, well, I'm not going to just say, hey, don't go out there and vote for him. Black folks are going to be, you'll do whatever you want. Black women had the highest rate. 92% of Black women voted for Jim Crow Joe Biden. And what have Biden did? While he was putting Kamala Harris as his vice president and to Ketanji, however you say his woman name, to Ketanji Brown as one of your Supreme Court justices. He was also on the other hand, waiting around to see Black women getting evicted from their homes. Okay. We got the article talking about Jim Crow Joe's legacy. We got article, and after article, we're going to break it all down today here on the Lawyers and Podcast show. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to give a love offering. Our cash app is $Lawyer Henderson 40. We're going to be talking about the legacy so far of Jim Crow Joe. We're going to be talking about it. They're going to talk about his legacy, even if he don't get re-election, which I don't think that he would get re-elected, but who knows? This is the United States of America, and anything can happen here, right? But Jim Crow Joe has had a history, as we know, of ignoring Black folks. He's had a history of doing nothing, and we've seen this now. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But it says here that Black women has the highest eviction rate in the U.S. As we were coming on, we were like, wow, really? Single Black mothers evicted more over here. Not to mention that landlords are no longer accepting Section 8 vouchers, as we talked about uh, previously in other video essays. We didn't go in deep into it, but we will coming up next week or so. We'll have a full video essay about the highest rate among Black women being evicted out of their homes and apartments. It goes on to say here that during the pandemic, that 85% of Black women got emergency rental assistance program or was on that program. Even before 2020, Black women face evictions as twice the rate of white people in at least 17 states, according to the study at the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. Sandra Park, senior attorney at the ACLU Women's Rights Project, said it's unimaginable to think about what communities will look like without broader policies in place to stop the looming and mass evictions. Well, we're keeping it all the way Black here on the Lawyers and Podcast Show. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. We're going to be talking about Jim Crow Joe Biden. Also, it goes on to say, before we get to that, Jim Crow Joe, it goes on to say that after it says that Sandra Park, senior attorney at the ACLU's Women's Rights Project, said it's unimaginable to think about what communities will look like without broader policies in place to stop the looming mass evictions. Unfortunately, the fallout would be borne most by women of color. When they say women of color, they're talking about Black women or Black people who have also had to bear so much the fallout of the pandemic and economic crisis overall, Part said. Okay, I forgot I left that out as well. But again, we're going to be talking about that next weekend on the Lawyer Henderson Podcast Show. But tonight, we're talking about Jim Crow Joe. Jim Crow Joe gotta go. Jim Crow Joe gotta go. Oh, let me quit, man. So here we have Joe Biden basically telling everybody he's running for re-election, right? And it is just, man, why is this man, as old as he is, this man don't want to do nothing. He doesn't want to retire from politics. This man just don't want to do nothing. You understand? Typically, when you get, let's say, in your 60s, you retire. But Jim Crow Joe don't want to do that. He wants to stay in politics. He don't want to take a vacation. He's been in politics, almost ever since I was born. He's been in politics since I was 12 years old. And the man don't want to take a vacation. He wants to run for re-election. Dude, you can take a vacation or something. The man is older than dirt. He don't want to retire. What's going on here? Take a vacation, leave. But no, Jim Crow Joe announced he's running for re-election, despite that his approval rating is tanking as we continue to tank. His legacy is not going to be about how he helped the Black community and civil rights. Jim Crow Joe, just like any other white supremacist and politician, is on the wrong side of history. He was on the wrong side of history, just like Ronald Reagan, like all these other people who's on the wrong side of history. That's the reason why Black people now supposedly are waking up and saying that they're not going to vote for Jim Crow a second term. Let's talk about it. It was really the Hill came out and reported on some things about Jim Crow Joe. And the Hill did an article I want to bring you all last month, February 28, 23. It says that Black voters are fleeing Bidens in droves, and here's why, by Joe Concha. Now, Joe Concha is a reporter for The Hill. And some white guy told me, he said, well, lawyer, you should support The Hill because the Hill is independent. It's an independent newspaper. And like everything I do, I try to basically give the benefit of the doubt. And I basically start reading up on The Hill. I read its founders and stuff. And no, The Hill is not independent. It continues to say the same kind of foolishness that the Washington Post write. It does the same type of foolishness that the New York Times write. And I don't know if The Hill had got a lot of some of that money from Jim Crow Joe and his administration. But The Hill, come on, you are not an independent newspaper. And let's talk about it. And here's why. The Hill writes here on Black voters are fleeing Biden in droves on February the 13th, 2022, which is last year, of course. It says here that on the second paragraph that President Biden poll numbers have been stunningly bad lately. Now, this is last year here. The most recent CNN poll has him at 58% disapproval, 41% approval. In December, Biden was at 49. To be fair, they said, President Trump poll numbers were similar, dismal at the stage of his presidency, but there were two major differences. Okay, they said that Trump's poll could be largely explained by special counsel investigation into the possible Russian collusion and the 2016 election, which ultimately led nowhere. Number two, Trump's base, those who strongly supported him, was infinitely stronger and more reliable than Biden's current base, which at just 15% strongly approval ain't much of a base at all. Meanwhile, the majority of Democrats don't even want Joe Biden to run again in 2024, with just 48% supporting the idea. This is unheard of after just 1 year. Two more big numbers to consider. Less than 7 in 10 Black voters, 69%, support the 46th president. This is significant because more than 9 to 10 Black voters, 92%, voted for him in 2020. So we're talking about an almost 25-point drop in relatively a short period of time. Inflation obviously is playing a huge role here, with the Wall Street Journal estimating the highest price of goods and costing families an extra $276 per month, or an additional $3,300 or so annually. Many poor and middle-income families and single parents individually simply cannot afford that while living paycheck to paycheck. Now, The Hill, let me stop right there. I know where you were going, but The Hill, Black folks are not just dealing with and talking about inflation overall. You don't hear people sitting down there on a porch talking about, oh, inflation is getting high. They may do a bypass conversation related to that, but not talk about it in a sense. Now, we've already explained to y'all what Black people are on. We're no longer talking about this minority coalition. We're not talking about inflation. We're not sitting there in our house talking about, inflation or, the economy per se. No, we're wanting a Black agenda. We wanted the Democrats and Joe Biden to do something for us. We wanted him to pass a bill that study reparations, which we don't need a study at all for. But The Hill, you basically, I think what you've done is that you try to move towards thinking that you were independent as far as independent newspaper from the New York Times. But then when you start to do your newspaper, you're still spewing the same thing, that people of color stuff. Okay. And we're just not going for that no more. Okay. We're not people of color. We're Black people. And that's what we need to be addressed. And that's what we're trying to be addressed. And that's what we're going to be addressed in the news media. And if that's not happening, then we're just going to ignore your newspaper. That's the reason why there's no subscribers that is basically subscribing to your newspaper, because y'all don't talk about Black people in your articles. You say people of color, you say minorities, you say women of color. All that stuff does not matter here. But the Hill, you did say something very much important here. It states here that Biden made voting rights, which is really just a federal takeover of elections, his focus start in 2022, pushing the hyperbole machine to maximum levels during a widely panned speech in Georgia. I asked area elected officials in America, how do you want to be remembered? Biden asked. As a consequential moment in history, they present a choice. Do you want to be on the side of Dr. King or George Wallace? Do you want to be on the side of John Lewis or Bill Connor? Do you want to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis? Biden said. Civil rights activist and MSNBC host Al Sharpton said the speech wasn't about gaining the support of those who oppose or on the fence about the proposed legislation. In this particular case, dealing with my friend and brother Joe, if he was trying to get votes, it was not the vote-getting speech, Sharpton on MSNBC Morning Joe said. Okay, so let me stop right there, because what Al Sharpton do is he go in trying to pretend like he is challenging the Democrats, even though he's a Democratic shield. And he tries to go in, and before you know it, when it's all said and done, Sharpton will support whoever becomes the presidency. And he will then start defending these people. You see what I'm saying? We basically knew that Al Sharpton was a Democratic shield. He tried to protect Biden. He tried to basically explain away from the Black staffers that is fleeing the Biden administration because they don't feel like they have any kind of decision making, which we already knew you didn't. Okay. And what happened to Tiffany Cross? I know she got fired from MSNBC. Is she going to get a job working in the White House? Where is she working now? You see? So, listen, breaking your tools is something that the Democrats and Republicans do, as Nellie Fuller taught us. But Biden has a long history of turning his back on Black people. He has a long history of turning his back on his most loyal voters. He had a history of doing this. And we told people this is the reason why I didn't vote for Biden at all. Okay, because I knew his history. I was there to talk about his history. And an article here written by Branko Marcetek on February 28, 23, this is last month. He writes here for, what's this newspaper called? This Jacobin.com. He said that, and this is going back to Biden's early years, okay? This was going back to where Biden was really this strong supportive of segregationists. This is where Biden was really showing his true colors as the typical white male, white supremacist hater and that he was back in the day. The article says here that then there's Biden infamous 2003 eulogy of segregationist and sexual predator Strom Thurmond. the man who Biden had worked to shift the U.S. criminal code in more punitive, unforgiving direction. Today, Biden's South Carolina eulogy is viewed as an uncomfortable relic of less enlightened era. In reality, it was unusual even then. Not only was Biden one of the only two Democrats to show up to the funeral, the other one, Fritz Hollins, had served with Thurman for 36 years in the state, and he was one of the mere 7 of 225 living former and sitting senators to do so. Thurman, who had famously filibustered the 1957 Civil Rights Act into oblivion, was a brave man whose lasting impact was a gift to us all, Biden told attendees. That's not to mention Biden's long history of taking aim at entitlements like Social Security, a program enormously important to African Americans, in which large numbers of Black Americans rely upon to survive, which I don't, really believe that statement there, because most Black people are not on Social Security like that, unless they're old. It's one of those strange ironies of history that Biden, having spent a career betraying African Americans on key consequential issues, now counts them as the main reason for his electoral viability. And that after insisting the Democrats that the party could only survive by prioritizing conservative white voters in the South over its multiracial base, he has been rescued from oblivion by mostly older Black voters in the South. The fact that most of those South Carolina backed him while telling pollsters that the U.S. economic system needs a complete overhaul reveals the irony to be a tragedy. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. We're talking about Jim Crow Joe Biden. Y'all put in office, man. Jim Crow Joe Biden, in his long history of turning his back on Black people, turning his back on his most loyal base. Jim Crow Joe do not like Black people. We know that. We told y'all that. He has not done a damn thing for Black folks since he's been in office. Let's look at another article here, and we're going to break it down for you here. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. No, I'm sorry. This is the same article here. Going back to it. This is what I tried to find this article. I'm sorry. Okay. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe, family. Elected as a county councilman in 1970, Biden was known as an advocate for public housing, earning him a racist abuse from bigot locals in Delaware. Yet he quickly assured the press about his public housing stance. "I am not a crusader rabbit, champion the rights of the people." True to his word, when plans for controversial moderate income housing projects came to the Newcastle County Council in 1972, one opposed by a crowd of hundreds who attended the meeting. Biden voted with the rest of the council to table its indefinitely. More accurately, Biden disappeared after a recess, and the vote had to be delayed until he could be found in his vote to put on the record. When the county's housing authority later drew up plans to buy a complex to convert to a non-elderly public housing, the agency's outreach to discuss the plan with Biden fell on deaf ears. Biden was too busy campaigning for Senate. Upon entering the Senate, Biden went where one would expect a champion of civil rights to go, on the Senate Banking Committee, where he worked on bills to regulate predatory private debt collection and sat on its housing subcommittee. But not for long. Explaining the other issues are more important for Delaware, the issue of crime and busing, Biden departed the banking in 1977 for the Judiciary Committee. The decision paved the way for him to become the Senate leading liberal opponent of busing and architect of mass incarceration. Each of his efforts is calamitous to the cause of Black equity, you see. Now, this is the same time where he was saying that he didn't want his blue-haired blind child with your Black children here, by the way. Goes on right here in the article that the full significance of Biden anti-busing crusade had rarely been explored. Though in his 1975 anti-busing amendment failed at clearing the Senate, it was credited by the Congressional Quarterly as signaling the end of upper chamber's previous commitment to defending desegregation measures. Meanwhile, his lasting anti-busing achievement, the 1977 Eagleton-Biden Amendment, which barred the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare from using its funding for busing, became the bane of existing for civil rights activists and school administrators around the country, whom it blocked from fully implementing desegregation plans that had no effects whatsoever on the court-ordered busing in Delaware. The ostensible reason for Biden's sharp right turn on the issue didn't prevent him from being pleased with its impact. Biden was so against busing that on a Judiciary Committee filled with former segregationists, he became the member who would vote against two historic Black nominees to the Justice Department because of their stance on the matter. Meanwhile, as Biden pushed the flurry of tough-on-crime legislation in 1980s and 1990s that would prove so disastrous for communities of color, talking about Black folk, he was well aware. He referred to the political hysteria of the law and order campaigns of the 1960s and later chided Reagan for his punitive approach. It costs more money to keep a prisoner in jail than send your son or daughter to Harvard or Yale, he told a crowd. As early as 1972, as Biden digamog on the danger of crime and drugs of his Senate campaign. One expert who Biden himself deemed intimately qualified to talk about crime trends have complained about politicians misleading the public on the issues. He assumed the expert wasn't talking about him, Biden said. You see, Biden has always been on the wrong side of history. He basically tried, often like white men do, to white-splain why he wants to ignore Black people issues. White men has a history when they in political government and you ask them specifically, what are you going to do for Black folk? And as they run for office, and they will dodge the question, and they will say minorities, people of color, blah, 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 blah. This is the kind of way that they have always been hotwired, because it all goes back to that original reason as to why white people don't like us, and that is because we have melanin in our bodies and they don't. Let's go to PBS NewsHour. Biden vows the Black justice dialogue to his most loyal voters. Here in an article, referring to Black women here, the striking promise is a reflection of Black women's critical role in the Democratic Party and growing influence of Black women in society. Now, this is January 28, 2022, when PBS did this news piece. It goes on to say that it is also recognition that Black women have been marginalized in American politics for centuries, and the time has come to right the imbalance of the court made up entirely white men for almost 2 centuries, a change Biden said Thursday is long overdue. Black women are most loyal Democrats. 93% of them voted for Biden in 2020 presidential election, according to the Associated Press VoteCast, a national survey of the electorate. and it's black women reliability as Democratic voters that makes it so important for the party to respond to their priorities and keep them in the fold, said Nadia Brown, professor of government at Georgetown University. Democrats know black women are going to turn out for them, so they have everything to lose if they don't do this. End quote. Black women turned out for the vote for Biden in greater numbers than for Hillary Clinton in 2016. They were vital to Biden win in states like Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Overall, they made up 12% of Biden's voters and reached even higher percentage in the heavily African-American states like Georgia, where they represent 35% of his support. In that state, where Biden won by just over 12,000 votes, he earned the backing of 95% of black women, end quote. Now, at the time, and let's stop right there for a minute. So at the time that Biden was putting 2 black women in office, he was basically telling the majority of black women that we have to take your homes away from you. You see, and it all goes back to the fact that the housing market is gaining even more higher situation, because the landlords are now saying not only is they're not taking, as I mentioned at the beginning of the segment, that they're not taking the Section 8 vouchers, but the landlords are increasing their rent and their mortgage payments for the banks, which means that a single person by themselves is going to have to work even more and possibly having to get a second job and to pay off a more 40 to about a 50-year mortgage in the next 15 years, you see. So Joe Biden is leaving black women in the cold, because even in the sense that, let's say, like I said, 85, was it 85? Let me go back to that. Was it 85% of black women who was getting those housing things? Yeah, it was 85% of rental assistance going to black women. And at the time that they were giving the rental assistance to black women, the housing market and the housing market is the market itself were increasing after the pandemic, or the pandemic. I say the pandemic because it was planned. And so what they were doing is they were basically increasing the rent, the mortgage, so that the landlords, because there was no price gap on rental of how a landlord can set the rent in most states, that they were going to do basically now have a new way of pricing out you if you didn't require, if you didn't have the amount of income. Okay, so they were doing that. So the pandemic was basically for the housing market to change their rental prices, their mortgages, and other things, you see. And Joe Biden basically knew that this was going to happen. But let's go on and read the article. It says here that Biden in particular owes black voters, and especially women, a debt from the primaries. His campaign was life support before South Carolina primary in late February of 2020. When he secured the endorsement for Representative James Clyburn, the kingmaker of the state's Democratic political orbit, by pledging to select a black woman for the Supreme Court. His campaign was struggling, Clyburn recalled on Thursday, citing Biden's 3 straight losses in early voting states of Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. This was quite frankly do or die for him. I urge him to come out publicly for putting an African-American woman on the Supreme Court. Biden have already made a fundamentally important statement about the importance of black women in his coalition by selecting Kamala Harris as his vice president. But putting a Black woman on the court is another historic step. Republican Ronald Reagan, in his 1980 presidential campaign, vowed to put the first woman on the Supreme Court and nominated Justice Sandra Day O'Connor once in office. But Biden pledged also respond to issues that Black women care about, says Glenda Carr, president of Higher Heights for America PAC, which advocates for Black women in politics. Black women are very in tune with knowing the court is important for their everyday lives, says Carr, citing big cases on voting rights and abortion. See, voting rights and abortion. Is that what Black women talking about? Voting rights and abortion? That's what y'all talking about over there? When we already know that the abortion rate among Black women aborting babies was at already 95 million already aborted babies since what's that woman name? What's the woman name who did Planned Parenthood? Since the origin, Margaret Sanger, since she founded that organization, Planned Parenthood, already 95 million Black babies have been aborted. That's genocide. Genocide. So here's the thing. We keep telling Black women don't jump on the bandwagon with other women. What the white women have against her men, you don't have against your man, because Black men don't run nothing here in this country. Okay, you might see a Black man running a jail or some prison system, but he doesn't get the last say in those places, right? So we know then that Biden's legacy is about lying to Black people, and specifically Black women. Not only did he know that the housing market was going to change, Biden knew that he was going to basically be elected on the fact that when he said that he was going to, when he went on, I think it was the Late Show with Conan O'Brien, and he talked about that the Hispanics were going to be the future of America. He also, in his campaign, when he was asked about reparations, he said that the Hispanics were going to be the future of this country and that we all should just deal with it. This is what his words were, okay? This is Biden's words. This man has been an anti-Black politician for years. And as we get to the monies that he has given away to every other group, and Black people are still having their hands out and say, what about us? This man, like any other Democrat politician and Republican politicians, have done nothing but give Black people symbolic gestures. Kamala Harris sitting there with White Daddy, and then Ketanji Brown, how do you say that woman's name? She's also with White Daddy. And both of them is the only thing that Biden can do for Black women. After putting this man in office with 92% voting for this man in the last election, this is disgraceful. And I told you that Biden's legacy is just like Obama. Joe Biden was brought in to fulfill Obama's third term and possibly fourth term. And as we saw in 2008, where Obama did nothing for Black people, we have seen Jim Crow Joe do the same thing. We are very disappointed of Obama, but we already knew that he was not going to do anything, just like Jim Crow Joe. Biden has not done anything for Black folks as well. Before we get to what the monies, some of the monies and some of the payments that Jim Crow Joe did give to other races of people, let's talk about the fact that he is giving money to Ukraine, billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine. Let's talk about the fact that Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who back in 2010 says that he was against illegal immigration, and now he is now supporting illegal immigration. And Biden is giving them millions and billions of dollars. But let's talk about first Ukraine. It says in an article that Politico so brilliantly wrote here on January 28, 23, Politico writes here that Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer pointed to votes this week to confirm the U.S. ambassador to Russia and approve a spending package that include $45 billion in emergency assistance to Kyiv as evidence that that America is standing solidly behind Ukraine. By passing the omnibus and confirming an ambassador, we can send President Zelensky back to Ukraine with a message that the Senate, the Congress, and the American people standing unequivocally behind the people of Ukraine. And we're backing that up with real dollars and real resources, Biden said. Senator Majority Chuck Schumer said. One way the Biden administration have worked to keep allies both domestic and foreign aligned is by arguing that there is a potential peace in Ukraine, and that Ukraine is doing what is needed to win the peace. In regards to negotiation with Putin, Biden stressed that Zelensky to open to talks while the Russian leader isn't. You have made it clear that he is open to pursuing. Let me put it this way. He's not open, but you're open to pursuing peace, Biden said. You're open to pursuing a just peace. We know that Putin had no intentions of stopping this Cold War, end quote. Let me just tell you about Putin. Putin could get in office again. Biden has to be reelected. You see, Russia doesn't have a democracy. Russia is ran by a communist government. So, or whatever, they have their own ideology, you see. And China just elected Xi Jinping for the third time, which is also a communist government. It's not like the so-called democracy that we have here in America, where you got to elect the president every 4 years. But what happened if you get a Republican in there like Trump who says, I don't want to fund this war. Zelensky needs to step down. NATO is already becoming very, very, very upset about the war in Ukraine. Germany is getting upset. All these European countries are getting upset because, and the fact is you have to spend and bring and give tanks and all this stuff and other types of weaponry to this small country that Russia is still basically occupying and will still occupy it. It has occupied even after Biden is gone, you see? And so now you basically have Zelensky getting billions of dollars from Joe Biden. Joe Biden has been giving money to everybody besides Black folk. He has been giving resources to everybody besides Black folks. Let's look at the history of Jim Crow Joe and his legacy of ignoring Black people. It goes way, way back when he was sitting on a council board. But let's basically talk about how much money he has given illegal immigrants and people who are not even citizens of the country. Thumbs up, like, share, subscribe as I prepare this article, The Legacy of Jim Crow Joe here. Here it says $350 million from the government, from government contracts for immigrants, the Immigration Service. The Vera Institute of Justice, a New York-based group, the Cassia center of justice. In 2018, the Biden administration considered paying up to $450,000 each to illegal aliens who were caught illegally entering the country back in 2018. $45 million, as I mentioned, for Ukraine. $300 million again in humanitarian aid to Afghanistan, according to Reuters. In July of 2021, $100 million to Afghanistan, including money and aid for Afghan special immigration visa applicants. He then says, it then writes that he will release and authorize $200 million in services and articles from the inventories of U.S. government agencies to meet the same needs, Reuters also reported. And this is giving more funding to Afghanistan. He also authorized $500 million in aid relief to Afghanistan refugees at the Taliban takeover back in 2021, The Hill reported. And so he was giving money to Afghanistan, and then they brought certain types of refugees over to the United States, and they had all of that money where they put them up in hotels, allowing them to live luxury in all of these hotels. See, this is what we're talking about. He was giving money to people who are not even damn citizens of the country. It goes on to say that Biden wasn't finished at that point. He gave tribal nations, Native Americans, $1.7 billion to settle Indian water rights settlements, infrastructure, land funding. He gave $13 billion directly to the tribal communities. These are Native Americans, of course, that was fighting over water rights. He then gave $2.5 billion to implement the Indian War Rights Settlement Completion Fund. He gave $75 million to Native Americans through his Department of Interior, federal land grants, and other funding. But what about Black farmers? Nothing. Biden basically now is continuing to give illegal immigrants money so they can fight deportation. Biden continues to give every other group financial resources, and Black people do not have anything. His vice president, Kamala Harris, went to Tyree Nichols' funeral and tried to do a publicity stunt, talking about, and that's why we should pass the George Floyd Act. Okay? And see, they used that man's funeral as a political stunt. They are a Democratic president. They had a Democratic Congress, and they had a Democratic Senate when Biden first got in office. And the George Floyd Act did not basically happen after George Floyd was murdered, after the conviction of Derek Chauvin. This is the game that these liberals play. Now, we're not saying that the Republicans are any better. But at least Trump said, well, let me take a look at Ice Cube's, program that he have, the Plan for Black America. Let's take a look at some of that, because the ideals in that is very good, you see. But these white liberals have a history of working with the white Jewish community to find ways to continue to keep us in a segmented labor market. And Black men, basically, at the majority of the time, is saying, we're not playing that game no more. In order for us to go out and vote, because voting is a transactional situation, we don't care what our women do. We're not going to go out and waste our time. And you see in the last election that it was a struggle between, what's that man's name down there who barely won a re-election, who was over Dr. King's church. Yeah, Raphael Warnock. He barely beat Walker. And one of the things that they were really scared about is that if they had a Republican coming from Georgia, then of course that would have, well, they already had the House. but they were worried about the Senate too. And if Walker would have won, I don't think it would have pushed him to get them to have the Senate, but they were scared. They were nervous about that. Okay. And so they knew, and they know that we as black men, we're not dealing with the Democrats. They know that. They know that we're not supporting Biden. They also know that we just don't care about what the Democrats are saying right now. They know that. They know that. They know that. You see. And it's just some stuff that Biden was basically doing, man. And it's just really ridiculous as to black people continuing to support him. The question is, will you support him for reelection? That is the biggest question on all of us in the black news media mind. Would y'all support Biden next term? And the question be, for what reason? Why would you go out there and support this man, okay, when he ain't done a damn thing for you? That would be the question I would ask for black voters. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. We're going to take a short music break, and when we come back, let's talk about the scandals that is now facing Joe Biden right now and his son, Hunter Biden. We'll be right back after this music break. What's up? You're listening to the Lawyers and Podcast Show. Keep it here. Like, share, and subscribe. The Lawyer Henderson Podcast Show. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. ScrewTube has me on what is called a double shadow ban. They suspended me twice. And I have not been suspended that long since high school. I think that I've been suspended so much. They had me basically having to get all of these updates. ScrewTube has suspended me so much. I think I'm still in high school now. They got me on, like I said, they started to say, now, nigger, you're violating our community standards and all that crap. And they put me into the category of what they call the disinformation category. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll take all of those, that stuff. But, just basically make sure that you give a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. ScrewTube is not letting people know when I come on. Okay. They want to keep me segmented into a sense, and that's fine. That's fine. ScrewTube is if they take us off air, then basically we're going to try to get that Patreon done so we can go ahead and have a backup platform. But ladies and gentlemen, we are back on the Lawyer Henderson Podcast Show with from our music break. And we've already talked about Jim Crow Joe Biden, where he's been giving money to these illegal aliens, these Latinos. They have the audacity to come over here talking about they deserve $30 an hour. The black farmers, they're still fighting for money. Jim Crow Joe Biden's administration have ignored them. Jim Crow Joe Biden has ignored black women. They're getting all evicted from their homes. Next week, we're going to be talking about the high eviction rate among black women. We're going to be talking about Asian hate crimes, Asian on Asian violence, white on white crime. We're going to be talking about all of that coming up on the Lawyers and Podcast Show. I also promised you the legacy of Amos Wilson. I need to get that done because that was very important, that we do the legacy of Amos Wilson, So that is also in the works. We're keeping it real black here on the Lawyer Henderson Podcast Show. Thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. Now let's talk about Jim Crow Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden's laptop. Hunter Biden's laptop contains selfies, some homemade pornography, and an email hinting at cozy relationship between him and business people from China and Ukraine. This is one of the reasons why the war has happened. Laptop from Hell, booked by Miranda Devine, details the sketchy lies that the current president has said about his son Hunter Biden's laptop. It also talked about tax affairs of the president's son. Biden's son caught, using crack cocaine when he was with a woman in Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles in 2028. And Donald Trump tried to warn us and make issues of Hunter Biden's business dealings with Ukraine. That's the reason why he's backing up the war. He's basically, Trump tried to warn us that Biden was doing business in Ukraine, Russia, and China, and which included high-paid, consultancies and gifts, and allegations that as vice president, Joe Biden had shaped American foreign policy in Ukraine to benefit his son. We know that. The war in Ukraine is about his son, Hunter Biden, being in a relationship deal where Putin was basically upset about the pipeline there. And so on the board was Hunter Biden's son. And so Jim Crow Joe was basically, when he was in vice president under Obama, he knew about what was going on with his son and sitting on the board, during that time. And so when Trump called him out for it, he tried to lie and say, no, that's not true. That's not true. The only person who's getting business deals is that guy right there. He was talking about Trump, who was doing business with China. And so Jim Crow Joe has been lying his tail off. It goes on to say here about classified documents that Adam Schiff, he was the one that lied for Biden when he was serving. I don't know if he's still serving on the House Intelligence Committee. He's a chairman. He was a chairman. But he was one of the reasons why Joe Biden got in office and there was no special investigation, because he was the one that says that, none of that was true about y'all accusing Biden of and his son involvement in Ukraine, the business deals that he was doing. But then it goes on to say that they found classified documents in a garage and 5 more documents in Biden's residence at his home in Delaware. And so therefore, while he over here talking about what Trump is not doing, Biden has been breaking all kinds of federal laws. This man is only now acting like he has a cognitive impairment because he can say, well, I have this, this cognitive impairment if he get brought up on charges after he leaves the presidency. But we already know that, white people are immune from a law. We know that. So, but the thing about this is this. The bottom line is that Biden's family, after he leave Earth, is going to be worth billions of dollars with his son doing business in Ukraine. And this is the only reason why they are basically helping the war in Ukraine to fight this war in Ukraine. It's going to take another president to look at that war and say, this doesn't make sense. We need to change our policy on Ukraine. We need to get Zelensky out. And what we need to do now is put a new president in there that is going to allow the pipeline to continue to go to Crimea, however you say it, or whatever. And that's what Putin is wanting. Putin got so many huge, tanks, missiles. Putin got a lot of that, and he has not even used certain of his weaponry before using his nuclear weapons. He got other weapons that he has not used yet. He got tanks and soldiers still on standby. He is only using his weak army men and women now, to say the least. So if you're thinking that you're going to fight a war in Russia and start World War III, you ain't seen nothing yet, because you're going to have to then open up a draft, because the man just got so many people, and now he got the backing of Iran. He got the backing of China. And he got from the East, they got all of these people who are now defying the West. And Putin has now taken this situation to Africa. And he got South Africa now on his side. And South Africa and other African nations now is siding with Putin, because Russia has a lot of things that Africa want and need. And so at the UN Security Council, you saw where South Africa did not side with the West, you see, because they have a great business relationship with Russia and China. And they want to see the war end, but they said that it should be done on a diplomatic situation. You know how white men are. They always basically they want you to come in to be put under the bus, but they don't want to fight their own wars in a way into which they basically are suffering. So what they'll do is they'll try to get everybody else involved. They'll try to, just like, if you go back to look at history, you'll see that the Los Angeles riots, the Black people, when you talk about the riots during the 1990s, the police did not show up because they wanted the Black protesters in Los Angeles to target the Korean business, which, I had no problem with that, because they shouldn't be in the mix of our communities anyway. Okay. It also reminded me of going back to this Asian on Asian crime that we are seeing, where those two old Asian men shot 8 other Asian people, and they're blaming Black people. Asian folks, listen to me. If you are afraid of Black people, get out of the mix of our neighborhoods now, okay? If that's what you're going to say and trying to impress the white media or white people in general, get out of our neighborhoods. It is Black people who are supporting these Korean business. It is Black people who are supporting Chinese business. It is Black people who are supporting Asian businesses. And for y'all to sit up there and say, oh, it's Black people who are up here causing this hate or this attacks on y'all, BS, okay? But to back to Biden, excuse me there, got tongue twisted there. But back to Biden. Biden is going around telling everybody that he is going to basically seek re-election. And next year, he is going to want Black people, specifically Black women, to go vote for him again. The question is, will you vote for Jim Crow Joe again, knowing he didn't do a damn thing for you? Leave a comment. I would love to hear your response. You're already talking about it. You couldn't wait for me to get that phone system. Oh, man. Oh, crazy. You've been listening to the William Henson podcast show. Thank you for tuning in. Next weekend, we'll be talking about it. Thanks for coming. That's when they get addicted from home and home. No over. Let's talk about it next week. Take care of yourself.